This is Hadrian's Wall, or what's left of it. For nearly 3 centuries, it marked the northern edge of Roman Britain, but it wasn't built to be impossible to cross. It was built to be watched, and to make watching routine. Using real archaeological remains and modern AI tools, we can begin to imagine what daily life on Rome's northern frontier may have looked like, and how it actually functioned. What you're seeing isn't a definitive reconstruction, but a plausible one, based on what survives and how Rome built elsewhere. This is the story of a frontier that was lived in, managed, and maintained. Not a wall at the edge of civilization, but a working system. What survives today is mostly the stone core. The facing stones were quarried away centuries ago, but we know from other Roman walls how this would have looked. Roughly 15 to 20 feet high, with a walkway behind a crenellated parapet, wide enough to move along, high enough to see from and be seen. The wall ran for 73 miles, from the River Tyne in the east to the Solway Firth in the west. Every Roman mile there was a gateway, every third of a mile, a watchtower. This wasn't a fortress, it was a surveillance system. Its power came from repetition. The same patrols, the same watch points. Every day, the wall didn't stop movement. It controlled it, filtered it, made it visible, and that visibility worked both ways. Anyone approaching would have seen this, a continuous stone statement of Roman presence, stretching across the horizon. Most of the time, nothing happened. And that was the point. Behind the wall, there's something less obvious. The Valum, a massive earthwork, ditch and banks, running parallel to the wall, about 100 yards south. This wasn't a defense in the traditional sense. It was a boundary. It created a controlled military zone. You couldn't just wander into the frontier infrastructure. Access was regulated, even for Romans. The Valum tells us something important. Control began behind the wall, not just in front of it. This was a managed space, deliberate, organized. But the frontier existed before Hadrian. Long before the wall was built, Rome was already shaping a presence here. Campaigns under governors like Agricola pushed north in the late 1st century, and roads like the Staingate began to fix Rome's presence into the landscape. This was the original frontier road, connecting forts, moving supplies, projecting power. Roman roads didn't follow the land. They imposed order on it, straight lines through uncertain terrain. The wall didn't invent the frontier. It formalized one that already existed, and that earlier system had to be fed. This is Corbridge. It doesn't look like much now, but this was one of the most important sites on the entire frontier. A supply depot, an administrative center, a crossing point on the River Tyne. Grain, weapons, tools, clothing. Everything the wall needed came through places like this. We can only reconstruct what the foundations tell us. Roman logistics were standardized. We know how they built warehouses, how they organized supply, how they moved goods. Corbridge may have been larger than what we're showing, but even at this scale, it's clear. Frontiers only work if they're fed, and feeding this one took infrastructure, planning, and a lot of unglamorous work. Vindolanda sits just south of the wall. It was here before Hadrian arrived, and it stayed occupied for centuries after. This is where we get closest to the people. The famous Vindolanda tablets, thin wooden sheets with ink writing, survived in the waterlogged ground. Birthday party invitations, requests for more beer, complaints about the roads. These weren't just soldiers. They were people living lives. Families settled here. Traders set up shop. Children grew up in the shadow of the frontier. Rome learned how to live here before it walled it. And when the wall went up, life didn't stop. It just continued, under a new kind of order. Every Roman mile along the wall, there was one of these, a mile castle. The name is misleading. These weren't castles, they were gateways, small, practical structures, just big enough for a handful of soldiers and a gate through the wall. This is where people crossed, under watch. with permission. Traders, locals, messengers, families. The wall didn't seal the frontier. It filtered movement through controlled points. Nothing here is oversized. Nothing is dramatic. The frontier worked because it was tight, repetitive, and always watched. Between the mile castles, every third of a mile, a turret, 2 soldiers, elevated position, clear sight lines, nothing elaborate, just a place to stand, watch, and be seen. Most days nothing happened. Patrols passed. Reports were filed. Routine as deterrence. The frontier worked because it was everywhere, all the time. Some forts were built directly onto the wall. Housesteads is one of the best preserved. This housed around 800 men, an auxiliary infantry cohort, likely from modern-day Belgium or the Netherlands. Not Roman citizens, provincials recruited from other parts of the empire, serving on someone else's frontier. Inside were barracks, a headquarters building, granaries, a hospital, even communal latrines. Everything laid out in the standard Roman grid. Order made visible. This wasn't a castle under siege. It was a permanent garrison managing a routine. This is administration wearing armor. Chester's was different. This was a cavalry fort. 500 mounted troops, fast, mobile, able to respond quickly to trouble. The fort sits right on the river, with a bridge that carried the wall across. Rivers weren't gaps in the system, they were controlled crossings. And cavalry meant Rome could patrol beyond the wall, enforce treaties, and show force without committing to pitched battles. There weren't many major battles here. The system worked because it didn't need them. Control didn't end at the wall. It moved along it. The wall ended at rivers. In the east, the Tyne. In the west, the Solway Firth. Not because Rome ran out of ambition, but because rivers were natural barriers, harder to cross unnoticed. At Wallsend, there was likely a naval or river patrol presence. The frontier extended onto the water. At Bowness, on the western coast, the fort has mostly eroded into the sea, but we know it was there. And south from Bowness, a chain of smaller towers and fortlets continued down the Cumbrian coast. The wall wasn't just a line, it was a system. Not far from the wall, tucked into a hillside, was something else. A Mithraeum, a temple to Mithras, a god popular with soldiers. Small, dark, hierarchical, initiation-based. This is where soldiers came to find meaning, to bond, to cope with isolation, danger, and the weight of routine. Above ground, Roman order, discipline, the machinery of empire. Below ground, mystery, ritual, belonging, order outside, meaning inside. So what was on the other side of the wall? Not an empty wasteland, not howling barbarians at the gates. People lived here, tribes with their own structures, alliances, and economies. Rome traded with them, negotiated with them, sometimes fought them, often ignored them. The wall wasn't a line between civilization and chaos. It was a choice about where to stop. And for those on the other side, the wall may have meant something different. A boundary, yes, but also a place to trade, a source of goods, a statement of power that could be tested, or ignored, or lived alongside. Life didn't end at the wall, it simply changed. 20 years after Hadrian's wall was finished, Rome pushed north again, the Antonine Wall, across the narrower Fourth Clyde line, built of turf, not stone. It lasted less than a generation. Then Rome pulled back to Hadrian's Wall. What does that tell us? The frontier was negotiable, strategic, not sacred. Rome drew the line where it made sense, and moved it when it didn't. One last thing worth remembering. The soldiers who built and manned this wall weren't Romans. They were auxiliaries, recruited from Gaul, Germania, the Low Countries, Syria, North Africa, provincials managing other provincials. They served 25 years. If they survived, they earned citizenship. Many stayed, raised families, became part of the landscape. The wall wasn't defended by Rome, it was defended by people Rome had recruited, trained, and placed here. The empire worked because it made others invest in it. After Rome left Britain in the early 5th century, the wall was abandoned. Its stones were quarried for churches, farms, roads, pieces of empire repurposed. What survives now is a fragment, but it's enough to ask questions. How do you control a frontier? How do you make power visible? How do you make watching routine? We can't know exactly what it looked like, but we can imagine what it did. And what it did was work. Not through walls alone, but through systems, routines, and people willing to watch, wait, and endure. This was Hadrian's wall, not a barrier, a frontier.